This is Jim Fetz, your host on The Real Deal, with my very special guest, a return engagement. His last appearance here about the lack of legitimacy of the British Crown drew a terrific response from listeners who want to hear more from one of the world's leading muckrakers and a personal favorite of mine, Greg Hallett. Greg, it's great to have you back on the air again.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. I've got a lot to cover. I want to sort of clarify the separation between the true royal family and the dark side, all of the scandals that are going on at the moment. And I just want to separate the two, because the true royal family is very intellectual, high-minded, very well researched. So I'm going to talk about Jacinta Saldana's being suicided and the apparent pregnancy of Kate Middleton and her sexual history, and how that parallels with some of our discoveries that were happening concurrently, and how it appears that Queen Elizabeth II has abdicated. She abdicated in the best way that she could, knowing that her status is not of a true queen. Queen Elizabeth II, or the invention of tradition called Queen Elizabeth II, fails to be the queen on several counts that have occurred during her lifetime, from her birth and from her purported lineage going back to 1840. So the person called Queen Elizabeth II is actually an invention of tradition carrying a 160-year line of illegitimate royals who were brought in concurrently with the British Empire being a mafia empire. So what we've had is a mafia royalty, and that was due to last for 200 years, from 1812 to 2012. So now it's the time to bring it out, to show that the royal families that we've had from 1852 on have been illegitimate. So I thought I'd give a brief rundown on the illegitimacy, just like a shorthand version of the previous interview, which is up on video on theworldoftruth.net as Hallett Report number 5. And that was the interview we did recorded on the 30th of December and played by you on the 31st of December 2012, kind of giving us the last word for 2012. Queen Victoria had 9 official children. Before that, she had one child that was born legitimately and in marriage. That was Marquis Manuel. The other 9 children were born bigamously and from incest, unbeknownst to Queen Victoria. And incest is not illegal if you don't know about it, but the person who sired the children did know, so he would be guilty of incest. And that was Lionel Nathan Rothschild, was the siring partner. Prince Consort Albert didn't sire any of Queen Victoria's official 9 children. So the next person to reign after Queen Victoria died on the 22nd of January 1901 was King Edward VII, who also knew that his elder half-brother, legitimate half-brother, was alive. So King Edward VII's coronation was delayed for 18 months, from the 22nd of January 1901 to the 9th of August 1902. At the same time, King Edward VII got the Secretary of War, Lord Kitchener, to alter the mandate of Freemasonry, which was originally about keeping the true monarch on the throne, and he changed it to whatever it is today. In the colonies, like in New Zealand, it's extremely corrupt and supports wrongdoings, massive wrongdoings, and the same is true of other countries as well. So there's a correction there that needs to be made. Now, King Edward VII, in his reign from 1901 to 1910, organised the murder of the Portuguese royal family, organised the abdication of the next royal family, organised the murder of his legitimate older half-brother, and then passed instructions on to his son King George V, who reigned from 1910 to 1936, to assassinate the exiled King of Portugal, King Manuel II of Portugal, in Twickenham in South London. So that destroyed the last vestiges or thereabouts of the Portuguese royal family. And then we had, from 1936 to 1936, January to December, we had King Edward VIII, who was never crowned. And then we had King George VI from 1936 to 52, who was crowned, but he was retarded. And he had a child with the person referred to as the Queen Mother or Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. And that child turned out to be epileptic. So King George VI was removed from being the siring male. He was replaced with Winston Churchill, who was the illegitimate son of King Edward VII. So there's still some supposed royal blood there, but it was from incest. King Edward VII was a warlord. Winston Churchill, his biological son, was also a warlord. Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon was initially engaged to the person who became King Edward VIII, who reigned January to December 1936. He told her he was going to abdicate. So then she was given the option to become engaged to the person who became King George VI. But he had knock knees and was 1 IQ point above retarded. So she brought in her whipping boy to become engaged and then married to King George VI. Now the whipping boy is someone that an aristocrat is raised with, and sometimes doubles for them in photos, and sometimes there's 2 photos taken with, say, the brother, where Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon is photographed as a child with a brother, and then the whipping boy is also photographed with the brother as the sister. So what you've got is photographic opportunity to show a complete history. And the whipping boy came from Waterford in Ireland, and the Irish accent had to be taught out of us, so it was more of a Scottish brogue. The true Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon got married and lived in France and died in 1950. And I got this from a royal, British and European royal, who was incredibly renegade. And so Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon's whipping boy married King George VI. And then Winston Churchill provided the sperm for the artificial insemination with Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon's whipping boy, resulting in Princess Elizabeth, who was born above the Coach and Horses pub in Mayfair in London. And that's why Queen Elizabeth II's nickname is Lilibeth Le Bon, meaning the maid. It meant that she was the daughter of the maid, the daughter of the whipping boy. Then when King George VI died in 1952, the very illegitimate Princess Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II. In 1946, Prince Philip became engaged to Princess Elizabeth under the extortion of Lord Louis Mountbatten. Lord Louis Mountbatten extorted the whipping boy, Queen Consort Elizabeth, and King George VI on the basis that the royal family had been fake since 1852. So in order to retain the crown, they sold their daughter into marriage to Prince Philip. And it appears that Lord Louis Mountbatten also included rights for underage sex with the firstborn. Prima nocte droit du seigneur, right of the lord, where the lord takes the virginity of the serfs. And that was Prince Charles. And there's photos of Prince Charles and Lord Louis Mountbatten shaking hands at a polo event when Prince Charles is still quite young.
Greg, would you repeat that? He had the first rights to
First,
sex?
yeah.
Sex.
So yeah. Lord Louis Mountbatten.
S-E-X.
Lord Louis Mountbatten had first rights to sex with the firstborn of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, which was Prince Charles. So Prince Charles was a pedophile victim from obviously a young age. Lord Louis Mountbatten was absolutely known for his pedophilia, and he was known for having schools under his own name, like Mountbatten School in Singapore. And one of the pupils there spoke to me. He would have been in his mid to late 50s. And he was saying that it was his role to meet Lord Louis Mountbatten at the gate when he was about a 5 or 6 year old. And then after that, he couldn't remember what happened in the next few days. And then he started to have very adult thoughts flashing across his mind, like sexual thoughts. And it appears that Lord Louis Mountbatten was testing drugs for Roche, including darken and silence and date rape drugs, and using it for sex with children. Now, other people have also brought out that Lord Louis Mountbatten is a pedophile. Now, Lord Louis Mountbatten introduced the well-known pedophile Jimmy Savile to Prince Charles. They used to spend quite a bit of time together and go to parties together. A lot of it was under the guise of charity events. On Jimmy Savile's 80th birthday, Prince Charles sent Jimmy Savile a pair of gold cufflinks, a box of cigars, and a note saying, "No one will ever know what you've done for this country." There's now just a phenomenal amount of children that Jimmy Savile's abused. And it appears that Prince Charles is definitely not the father of Prince William, and it's not the father of Prince Harry. And it was Princess Diana who ensured this, possibly on the knowledge that she knew, definitely that Prince Charles was having a long-standing affair with Camilla Parker Bowles, and that Prince Charles may have been pedophile. And that may be why the current laws of succession are completely bypassing Prince Charles. Prince Philip and Lord Louis Mountbatten also had sexual relations. Prince Philip was also known for getting drunk on Royal Navy ships and then falling over on his stomach so that he could be sodomized. And some of the sailors who sodomized him told co-researchers of mine that, "Oh yeah, I've had Prince Philip." So he was quite into sodomy and into children. And now on Sandringham Estate in Norfolk, they're finding lots of bodies of children and women buried around in the yards. So it looks like Prince Philip, who extorted his marriage with Princess Elizabeth, is a pedophile, who then agreed to marry Princess Elizabeth, and that their firstborn would be sodomized as a child by Lord Louis Mountbatten.
This is also unbelievably disgusting.
Well, like,
What was the location where the bodies of children and women have been found again?
Sandringham House, which is actually Sandringham Palace. And it's actually on the Dragon Line that runs from Transylvania, where Prince Charles has bought a lot of properties. It's where the Dracula castle is.
So are you implying then that the yard has been dug up, that these bodies have been unearthed, and if so, who was responsible for that?
Yeah, but the problem is that Queen Elizabeth owns the court buildings. So there's no hearings in court against the Queen.
Yeah, but have these bodies then been excavated, as you imply, and if so, by whom?
They have been exhumed, and they were buried randomly, not as graves, and they were buried to be hidden. And investigations are ongoing.
I mean, yes, if they're buried randomly, it'd be very difficult to locate them. I think it's remarkable they've discovered, you
Yeah,
imply, quite a few.
there are quite a few bodies there. So we've got the sexual indiscretions of Prince Philip, who's married to Queen Elizabeth. Now, Prince Philip used to keep a black British taxi, a London taxi, and a chauffeur's cap. And he used to put his chauffeur's cap on, get in the taxi and drive to a brothel and walk in as though he was going to pick someone up. And then he would stay in the brothel. And one of his favourite sex hunting buddies was Kate Middleton's father.
One of his favorite sex hunting buddies.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a sex hunting connection between Kate Middleton's father and Prince Philip.
This was for the purpose of pedophilia. Is Kate's father also a pedophile?
If you think of the movie Eyes Wide Shut,
Yes.
it's kind of an everything goes party, but what they show you in the movie is very tall, skinny, model-like girls, generally in their 20s.
That's the
Early
film
20s.
that gave orgies a bad name.
Kate Middleton is good friends with the owner of the Killing Kittens sex club. And Killing Kittens offers a sexual service like Eyes Wide Shut, which is the tall, skinny, model-like woman. So it appears that Prince Philip has got together with Kate Middleton's father and arranged an Eyes Wide Shut type event with Kate Middleton and Prince William, and then use that to entrap Prince William into marriage and therefore make Prince William completely controllable. Now, since the monarchy is illegitimate, and all the parties in it have been illegitimate since the birth of Queen Victoria's second child, Princess Vicky, in 1840, then whoever has the most control over the monarchy gets to run the monarchy. And it appears that Kate Middleton is an agent in a similar way that JFK's wife, Jackie Kennedy, who became Jackie Onassis, was an agent. She moved from President of the United States to one of the biggest shipping magnate heroin traffickers on the planet, Aristotle Onassis. And whenever Aristotle Onassis got into trouble with his heroin trafficking, he would call in the highest diplomat that he could to fluff around so that anyone who wanted to charge him would be too embarrassed to charge him. And the person he used for that was Winston Churchill. So post-World War II, Winston Churchill spent a lot of time with Aristotle Onassis. So the Eyes Wide Shut type sex clubs like Killing Kittens, which Kate Middleton is associated with, links to the drug trafficking. And there are a lot of reports of, actually ongoing reports, of Prime Minister David Cameron, his father being a ship jumper between the heroin and the money, taking the heroin over and taking the money back. And this sort of thing can only happen with an illegitimate monarchy. And Queen Elizabeth II doesn't have any say in the matter because Lord Louis Mountbatten and Prince Philip have extorted Princess Elizabeth into marriage and control of her children, including Lord Louis Mountbatten's sex with Prince Charles and the parentage of the other children. A triumvirate formed for the heroin trafficking, which involved Prince Philip, Lord Porchester and Lord Plunket. And it appears that Queen Elizabeth II, who is virtually a slave because she's compromised, that she had a child with the heroin trafficker Lord Porchester called Prince Andrew. And then she had a child with the heroin trafficker Lord Plunket called Prince Edward. And then Prince Philip had sex with Prince Edward's wife, Sophie Rhys-Jones, and produced their child. So, in compromising the royal family, Prince Philip, who was initially an outsider, has taken control of the British royal family, has turned it into a pedophile, heroin trafficking, and Nazi organisation, which is not a royal family at all. It's actually, the British royal family, as they are illegitimate, is completely destroying the United Kingdom from within.
Greg, this looks like the perfect opportunity to take our first break. Jim Fetzer with the revisionist historian par excellence, Greg Hallett, discussing the royal family and many bizarre aspects. We'll be right back. This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, continuing my conversation with Greg Hallett. Greg, you made an observation in passing characterizing Jackie Kennedy as an agent. I would like some elaboration on that. It's always seemed to me that Jackie actually decided to marry Onassis because he was the richest man in the world and she felt could provide protection for her and her children. Not that there was anything malevolent going on under the surface. I mean, it's always seemed to me that Jackie was actually politically very naive, that while she knew a great deal about culture, literature, art, music, and so forth, that she was virtually oblivious to the political ramifications and shady goings on in the world. So I'd really appreciate some elaboration on what point you're making here.
To my understanding, she was a Mossad agent, a bit like Mandy Rice Davies and Christine Keeler. Probably the best example is when JFK was shot, which you're a world expert on, if not the world expert. An hour and a half later, she was on Air Force One as the witness to Lyndon B. Johnson becoming the American president. And she appeared to be utterly and totally calm. She wasn't a wreck at all.
Well, my take is she was in a state of semi-shock. Lyndon inappropriately took control of JFK's plane, which was completely unnecessary. He didn't even need to be sworn in. But the introduction of the needless event of swearing in provided opportunity to move his luggage from Air Force Two to Air Force One, also completely unnecessary. But more importantly, I'm convinced to offload the body of JFK and transport it to Air Force Two, or at least to a compartment in Air Force One from which it was offloaded at Andrews Air Force Base into a helicopter and then flown to Walter Reed, where the military's best forensic pathologist proceeded to remove lead fragments from the body, which were of various makes and calibers, so that it wouldn't be obvious merely from the lead slugs alone that JFK had been assassinated by means of multiple shots fired by multiple shooters. So I don't think that Jackie's being there, she was, in my opinion, still in a state of semi-shock, was significant. That was Lyndon Johnson's machination. He arranged all of that and wanted her there to give a visual appearance of, a legitimacy of succession from the Kennedy to the Johnson administration.
He was very definitely in a hurry to do that. But she didn't appear to be, from the photos I've seen, in a state of shock. We could discuss that for a long time, but there are sex slaves, and we're allowed to see some of them publicly. And Marilyn Monroe was another sex slave that we're allowed to see publicly.
Well, Marilyn certainly got around and had lots and lots of affairs and dalliances, including with JFK and more seriously with Bobby.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all that is rather well documented in a number of fascinating books. But one entitled, as I recall, MM at the End of the Rainbow, which is a particularly fascinating piece of work.
Some of the sex workers or sex club workers or killing kittens workers or Eyes Wide Shut workers are actually classy looking women in long sleeve shirts. They don't sort of all wear bikinis and, act like hookers. Some of them are very high class and they're intelligence gatherers. Marilyn Monroe had a 161 IQ. She was supposed to have seduced Brezhnev and got secrets from him. And I think that Marilyn actually worked with Jackie Kennedy in a similar realm. They both worked on Brezhnev together. And Marilyn Monroe was actually the brighter of the two, although she didn't look it. And a lot of the women who can flirt very well are actually highly intelligent, and they can be compartmentalized so that they retain everything that's spoken and everything that's seen. What I want to do is talk about if Queen Elizabeth was never crowned and is not who she says she is. She was never crowned because the stone of Scone was not under the chair or throne that she sat on when she was being crowned. And her mother is not who she says her mother is, and her father is not who she says her father is.
So it was a deliberate contrivance that the stone not be present under the throne.
Well, the stone of Scone has been stolen so many times, not even sure if the one that was stolen was even the original one. It's been stolen, returned, and stolen, replaced, and stolen again, and hidden. And that may be part of the Shin, which went from 1812 to 2012, and from 1852 on, especially from 1901, 1902 on, it was done so that there would be no legitimate kingship until the true kingly descendants came back, until they returned at the end of the Shin, which was from the 19th of September 2012 on.
So the security at Westminster Abbey is simply not that great that the stone can be repeatedly stolen. I mean, it would seem, I visited the Abbey and it wasn't obvious to me how much surveillance or security was present.
Well, there was,
but it's fairly remarkable that an object of such extreme historical and even legal or quasi-legal significance should be repeatedly taken.
And it's been taken for a reason, and those who took it having inside knowledge on why it should be taken. So what we've got is a situation where it appears that Queen Elizabeth II has abdicated, and that she abdicated on the 28th of October 2011 as best she could, given that she was not actually the legitimate queen. And she said this.
Have a listen to it. She claimed to be quoting an Aboriginal proverb.
We are all visitors to this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love. And then we return home.
That's as good as an abdication as you can get. She appeared to abdicate again in December 2012, and that was with the suiciding of Jacinta Saldana, which is quite a tricky thing to explain. On the 3rd of December, Kate Middleton and Prince William went into the King Edward VII Hospital, which is a mile and a half north of where they lived. She was showing no signs of sickness from 8 p.m. on the first night that she went in. Prince William left at 9 p.m. that night. And then there was a phone call made by Mel Gregg and Michael Christian, posing as Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles at 4:30 p.m. in Sydney time, Tuesday the 4th of December, calling 00442074864411 and getting King Edward VII's Hospital in London time, Tuesday 4th of December at 5:30 a.m. when there was no receptionist on duty. And Michael Christian had just joined that radio station the day before, and he said someone handed us the number. So it appears that Michael Christian in Australia was something of an agent. Nurse Jacinta Saldana was filling in for the receptionist because it was 5:30 in the morning and took the prank call. The other DJ, the female, Mel Gregg, said, "Oh, hello there, could I please speak to Kate, my granddaughter?" And Nurse Jacinta Saldana, as the receptionist, said, "Oh yes, just hold on, ma'am." She was only on the call for 5 seconds. She listened for 3 seconds and spoke for 2 seconds, and then transferred the call. And she believed that they were members of the royal family. Michael Christian and Mel Gregg said during the call out of earshot, "Our mock British accents were terrible. This was the easiest prank call ever made." And the entire call lasted 2 minutes and 10 seconds when they spoke to the nurse by the bedside who gave them a reasonably full report. DJ Mel Gregg said, "We thought 100 people would have tried it before us. Thought it was a silly idea. Accents were terrible." And they were employed by the Sydney radio station Today FM. Apparently they had made at least 5 attempts to ask permission to make the prank call. They never got through. Nurse Jacinta Saldana lived in the King Edward VII Hospital accommodation at Weymouth Street because where she lived with her family was 4 hours drive to the west. And she was found dead 9:25 or 9:35 a.m. on Friday the 7th of December 2012. And she had damage to her wrists and was found hanging off a wardrobe by a scarf.
Really terrible for 3 seconds of misunderstanding.
Yeah, but there was a choice. Let's say that she was suicidal, which she was. There was a choice to kill the nurse who had received the call for 3 seconds and spoken for 2 seconds, or the choice to kill the nurse who had made the full report on Kate Middleton's medical condition, which lasted for 2 minutes.
Why was it necessary to kill either one of them?
It was acknowledgement of Queen Elizabeth II being illegitimate and not being the Queen and abdicating. It's bizarre the way these people work. When I deliver a letter to 10 Downing Street, they refuse it. When I deliver it to the post office box 15 minutes walk away, they receive it and then they don't answer it. When we post it by registered mail, they don't acknowledge it. But now that I've spoken on radio largely to you about the whole background to the royal family being illegitimate, they have to acknowledge us and the work we've done, and they do it in such a way that those who know can understand it, and those who don't know will miss it. And in this, the names and dates are really important. Like the 7th of December when she was found dead, 7 means apply universally. It means, really look at this in detail and take the broadest perspective on it and have a look at it. I'm trying to not mix up the true royal story, which is a pure and high story, with the shenanigans and murders and drug dealing and pedophilia and sex scandals that the incumbent and fake British royal family are involved in and run. But at some point I've got to do the crossover just to get the truth across. When I first discovered Marcos Manuel's Sivalingam, which is a burial place for a hidden king, in March 2012, he was buried there from 1910 to 1914, and we didn't know when he'd been moved or where he'd been moved to. And from the 15th to the 17th of November 2012, which is just 3 weeks before this happened, I found where they had moved Marcos Manuel's body to. And that was to Mont Saint Michel in Normandy, which is a place for Saint Michael and the Archangel Michael. And it's also the place where Joan of Arc, a statue of her, stands guarding the Templar Temple Church, and possibly with the effigy of her. She's very much connected with it, and she's considered the personification of the Archangel Michael. And she came about when the royal families were just operating as an absolute mafia, and where there were scandals and rorts happening all over the place, so that you couldn't trust your government, you couldn't trust your royal family, and there was no hope, which is pretty much the situation that we've got now. There's just massive scandals going on. So I happened to find the burial place there, and then that was confirmed in a royal mark done by his wife. I had emails to this effect going to and fro with the true Prince of Wales, and that would have been picked up. So they would have seen that we had taken the photos, identified the place, and found the royal marks which actually absolutely confirmed what I'd found. So that was the 15th to the 17th of November, and then the 3rd to the 7th
of November, just this past year or earlier?
2 months ago, like 2012.
Remarkable.
So thank you. So then 3 weeks later, the Kate Middleton going to hospital thing happens, and the good nurse Jacinta Saldana is suicided. Saldana is an important name. She was Indian, but the Portuguese went to India and colonized that area. So she had a Portuguese name. Saldana is a Portuguese name, and Jacinta is a Portuguese name, and the way it's spelt with an H is in the old Portuguese style. And Saldana was the name of the Duke of Saldana, who had transported the hidden king Marcos Manuel. When he was transported from England to Portugal, he guided him from the shores or the border of Portugal to the orphanage, which was the Real Casa dos Expostos, the Royal House of Foundlings. So there was a name code in there, and the DJs were from Australia, which is Australasia, which includes New Zealand, and their names were Mel Gregg, which is my name, Greg, and his name was Michael Christian, and he'd started at work at the radio station the day before, and we found the gravesite at Mont Saint Michel, or Mont Saint Michael, which is a high Christian place. Saint Michael and the Archangel Michael are the same thing, but they are Christianizations of the Metatron. And when Marcos Manuel was photographed amongst 6 princesses, he was photographed in the Metatron position. So in doing the suicide, the royal family were acknowledging that we had found the burial place of the hidden king and the true king of England and the United Kingdom, with Mel Gregg, melody meaning song of, or the lineage going back to Solomon, Michael Christian, and Jacinta Saldana. And they'd done that, and absolutely concurrently, and almost just like 3 days after, we had sent the emails of the nearly finished written work with the photographs laid up, decodifying everything. So these people who are capable of murder are also capable of codifying murder. The invention of tradition, Queen Elizabeth II actually acknowledged that we were the true monarchs of the United Kingdom with the suiciding of the good nurse Jacinta Saldana. And at the same time, Queen Elizabeth II abdicated. So we presented the letter to 10 Downing Street, registered post 24th of June 2010, hand delivered 2nd of August 2010, then hand posted 2nd of August 2010. So they had the letter and they had the book, and Queen Elizabeth II then instructed Prince William to get engaged, and he got engaged to his killing kittens sex worker, Kate Middleton, who was the daughter of Prince Philip's sex buddy. Then we developed the book further, and Queen Elizabeth II offered her resignation on the 28th of October 2011. And then we found the body of the true king had been moved, and we found that gravesite, and we found royal marks to confirm where that gravesite was, and a painting done by his widow in 1914, the same time that the body was moved. Queen Elizabeth II acknowledged that on the 7th of December, and in her occult way, which means secret, she has abdicated. And now we find that the laws of succession are being changed, and they're being backdated to the 28th of October 2011.
To that specific date, Greg.
Yes, which is to the date that Queen Elizabeth II abdicated.
Isn't that Fascinating.
I mean, it's very hard to explain. You know, it's about 30 pages of detail, and all the other people involved in the cover-ups and the media scandals, which goes through to the phone hacking scandals. It goes back to Max Clifford, who was a PR agent for the Queen, but he's actually a British military intelligence agent, and he's just been arrested for pedophilia under Operation U-Tree on the 6th of December 2012, the day before Jacinta Saldana was suicided. He was arrested for sex scandals.
Greg, we have to take our second break. Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, with my very special guest, Greg Hallett, muckraker and revisionist historian whom I greatly admire. We're talking about the illegitimacy of the present royal family. The reign in England. Will be right back. This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, continuing my conversation with Greg Hallett about the lack of legitimacy of the royal family occupying the throne in England today. Greg, I know you have created a YouTube based upon our last interview. Perhaps you could comment about that, what our viewers might find there, where it's located and such.
Yeah, it's on www.theworldoftruth.net.
The World of Truth.net. Hallett report.
It's an hour and a half video with the pictures and the video inserts. It really proves the true royal family, and the current one is an absolute fraud. On that video, I've got a recording of the Queen's staff admitting that the British royal family is completely illegitimate. Twice.
That's quite stunning, Greg.
Yeah.
All by itself.
Yeah, all by itself. But, you know, there's just a plethora of information here. And again, I want to say that I want to get this information out, and it's the dark side, because the incumbent fake flat-lie royal invention of tradition royal family is a fraud, and they're up to all sorts of sexual, murderous and drug trafficking tricks. And part of the result of the Shin, in the middle of the Shin, was to turn the British Empire into a mafia operation, which the people of England really know that it is, which included World War II and the training of Adolf Hitler in 1912, from February to November 1912, and it turns out that Adolf Hitler is first cousin with Queen Elizabeth II.
Hitler was a cousin of Queen Elizabeth II.
Lionel Nathan Rothschild was the father of King Edward VII, who was the father of Winston Churchill, who was the father of Queen Elizabeth. And Lionel Nathan Rothschild was the father of Alois Hitler, Hitler's father, and then Adolf Hitler. So actually, Queen Elizabeth's father was first cousins. Winston Churchill was first cousins with Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler was trained in Britain in the Tavistock there, and or the Tavistock, which was an island up until 1920-21, until the Irish Civil War, and the South gained its independence. What I'd like to point out, it shows it very clearly in the video, Prince William is very definitely the son of King Juan Carlos of Spain. And the photos that I've got up there show them to be absolutely identical. You just look at them and go, that's father and that's son. And I've got photos of them at age 24 and 28. And their partners, Queen Consort Sophie and Kate Middleton, also look incredibly similar. So in the last video we discussed that perhaps fathers and sons pick wives which are similar to their father's wife. Prince Harry is the son of James Hewitt. Lady Diana organised that both of Prince Charles' sons would be illegitimate. So now we've got a law of succession proposed change instigated by the fake royal family, backdated to Queen Elizabeth II's abdication on the 28th of October 2011, that the royal family and the monarch jump Prince Charles, the current Prince of Wales, and go to his children. And in all of the literature that's up on the government websites about the proposed changes to the laws of succession, Prince Charles is not mentioned, and it's not mentioned that it's only for the children of Prince Charles. It's just mentioned on the PR side of it that it's to allow the monarch to marry Catholics and remain being a monarch, and for the elder daughter to be the monarch over the younger son. So everyone goes, oh great, that's equality for religion and equality for the sexes. But in actual fact, what they're doing with the change of laws of succession is creating an entirely new kingship, because Prince Charles has no legitimate children. So what they're trying to do is to get the Commonwealth heads of government to vote for a new king. Obviously, what's happening is they're voting for a mafia king, because Prince William is illegitimate and he's controlled by Kate Middleton, who's got strong associations with the Killing Kittens sex club, and whose father was a sexual playboy with Prince Philip, who didn't have any limits to what he would try sexually. He was basically into everything: men, women, boys, girls, snuff. Queen Elizabeth II couldn't do anything about it because she's illegitimate.
Who is into all of that, Greg?
Prince Philip.
Prince Philip himself into all that, including snuff.
That's why there's bodies around Sandringham House. He was very closely associated with Jimmy Savile, who is a well-known pedophile, who was guiding Prince Charles, and whom Prince Charles gave him an 80th birthday present and said, thank you, no one will ever know what you've done for this country. And what Jimmy Savile was doing was organising children for pedophilia for the royals and elite, which are the fake royals. Because Prince William is illegitimate, the line of Windsor has ended. Queen Elizabeth II abdicated on the 28th of October 2011, confirmed that to us with finding the body of the true king on the 7th of December 2012. And the change to the laws of succession are done to bypass Prince Charles, who appears to be a victim of pedophilia and pedophile, and has close friends who are pedophiles, and appears that his father's a pedophile, Prince Philip. So they're creating an entirely new kingship, which is a change of the laws to succession to the throne of England. And I've tried to contact the people who are in charge of it, which is the New Zealand Cabinet. And I looked at the CIA list for the heads of the Commonwealth countries. And the last time it was updated was December 2008. And that even included Helen Clark as the head of the Commonwealth Government of New Zealand, when she was no longer the Prime Minister from November 2008, a month earlier. So there's not an official list nor email access of the heads of the Commonwealth governments. And the New Zealand government is just advertising the change of laws of succession to be religious equality and gender equality, and doesn't say that it's only for the children of Prince Charles, the current Prince of Wales, to become the monarch. On top of that, Helen Clark, who's got the most atrocious history. She's known in New Zealand as the vampire, and she's been photographed and published looking very much like a vampire with a black collar, high, pointy raised, and she's a very ugly woman, very, very ugly. She was a Tavistock, St. Petersburg gangbang prostitute, and the Russians would shag anything as long as it was a white woman from the West. Gave them a sense of superiority. So she was a Freud Hilton graduate. Then from 1980 to 82, she was in Wellington working her way up the political ladder. And Vladimir Putin was in Wellington under the code name Valenti Putin, and he had two body doubles when he was there. And he was collecting the sexual secrets of New Zealand politicians, judges, lawyers, mayors, and people of notoriety, and it was Helen Clark who was providing them. Then Helen Clark moved from prostitute to lesbian, and just before she became an MP, she married a known homosexual child sex abuser in a cover marriage. And then in late 2002, she was noted in an act of pedophilia with a 10-year-old Vietnamese girl in Vietnam. So she's a prostitute, lesbian, pedophile. And then in order for New Zealand to join NATO, she had to traffic 10 kilograms of NATO's heroin, which she did through the Minister of Justice, Annette King, who gave it to the police. And then Annette King became the Minister of Police. And she's also involved in nuclear arms dealing, where South Africa was storing some nuclear weapons in the middle of the North Island of New Zealand, and they went missing, and Helen Clark had stolen them and on-sold them. So she's a prostitute, lesbian, pedophile, heroin trafficking, nuclear arms dealer. And she then, in 2003, she requested the murder of her very close friend Michael King and had him murdered, and the person who picked up that murder was the Chief Justice Shana Elias, who's still the Chief Justice. So she's also a murderer, and then on the basis of that murder of a close friend, she got into the position of third in charge of the United Nations. So she's in charge of third world countries, and then within 10 days of taking up that position, there was the fake bird flu scare in Mexico. So she's a disaster waiting to happen. Now, since the laws of succession have been announced to be worked out from the New Zealand Working Group, which is the New Zealand Cabinet, Helen Clark, who's still third in charge of the United Nations, has taken up offices in Parliament buildings in Wellington and New Zealand. She appears to be interfering as much as possible. Now that brings the intergenerational line of ongoing sex scandals as a way of controlling governments and monarchies. King George V was supposed to be the son of King Edward VII, but actually he was the son of Tsar Alexander III of Russia. Tsar Alexander III sired the child in Denmark with Princess Alexandra of England, Princess of Wales. And then the person who became Tsar Alexander III then murdered his older brother, Grand Duke Nicholas II, in order to take the throne of Russia. And the way he did that was getting someone with typhoid to cough on a handkerchief and then pass that over a prostitute, who then jumped into the carriage with Grand Duke Nicholas II in Italy, who then got typhoid, misdiagnosed as meningitis, and died of it, thus giving the throne of Russia to Tsar Alexander III. So what we've got in Russia is murders and sex scandals, and Putin running a vast amount of the world with huge spheres of influence based on that he has collected the sexual secrets of prominent politicians and mayors and judges and lawyers and MPs from all around the world.
Well, Greg, the more I listen to you, the more it seems to me a case is to be made that in order to understand historical events, you have to have knowledge of the personal sexual lives of public figures. I mean, it's extraordinary that that should be the case. But your illustration of Putin's influence based upon his knowledge, just as J. Edgar Hoover manipulated Congress because he had sex dossiers on senators and representatives, strongly suggests that that's a necessary element of the proper interpretation of historical events.
It is. It's basically the way things are done, and it's the way things are done under governments which have become mafia governments, and under monarchies, with the British monarchy being a mafia monarchy. Monarchy is mafia, based on the fact that they're illegitimate, but also sexual indiscretions and sexual bribery, which doesn't stop unless you nip it in the bud. It actually carries on intergenerationally. So what we've got is a bit of a repeat of the Russian-Danish King George V of England, with Prince William being sexually compromised by his wife, Kate Middleton, who's associated with the Killing Kittens, Eyes Wide Shut type sex club, which has been going intergenerationally. So what we're looking at with Prince William is someone who is utterly and totally compromised from woe to go. And we've got the mafia and the sex mafia trying to influence the change to the laws of succession to the throne of England and create an entirely new kingship that would suit the mafia, that could then control the British monarchy. So with Prince William, we're looking at a kingship which is completely, utterly and totally mafia. No matter how sweet and naive he looks, he's illegitimate and sexually compromised. I'll give a brief resume on why my books are late. I was working on a case against Peter Williams QC, who is the person who funded the assassination of Lord Louis Mountbatten, which was 100,000 New Zealand dollars, it was 40,000 pounds. The payments are made from Kensington in London, from Terry Clark to Peter Williams QC. 40,000 pounds or 100,000 New Zealand dollars was paid to Ed Leary on the 17th of August 1979, who was Terry Clark's lawyer working in partnership with Peter Williams, who was also Terry Clark's lawyer. Although the specific accounts were obscured by Judge Andrew Spate, typically it was paid from the alias Tony Benetti to Terry Clark's holding company CN Partners, to Terry Clark's death account Alexander James D building account in New Zealand, with Ed Leary withdrawing it the same day it arrived on the 17th of August 1979, and 10 days later, on the 27th of August 1979, Lord Louis Mountbatten was assassinated.
When it comes to murders, you have a surfeit of choices.
Well, yeah, the source is the Auckland District Law Society, Ed Leary, Edward Poulter Leary versus New Zealand Law Practitioners Disciplinary Tribunal, and the Auckland District Law Society versus Leary, CA 286, Court of Appeal, 15th of April 1987, and Billy Boyd, George William Stewart Boyd versus Auckland District Law Society, DISIP 4/15, 1985, and Boyd, NZL PDT, Oral Decision, 12th of August 1997. So the payment schedule actually came from the Auckland District Law Society. And when I tried to resubmit that to the High Court of Auckland, they sealed all the information.
Really?
Yeah, they sealed it and did various assassination attempts to get me out of the country. And only when I was out of the country, they stopped any contact by email and then had the case heard in my absence and denied me a lawyer and suppressed all of the information. So even if I did have a lawyer, they couldn't read my defense.
Greg, it's unbelievable what you've been through.
Yeah. Okay.
And the corruption of the judicial system is just breathtaking.
It's sexually corrupt. Like the Chief Justice of New Zealand, Sean Elias, is married to a homosexual child sex abuser who was also involved in a murder. And he wears a Nazi uniform during his sex soirees. While this case was going on, Peter Williams and Prince Philip, who are both pedophile Nazis with homosexual leanings, they organised an attack on me. Based on an interview where I said I had the Holy Grail, having delivered it to Osland Chapel in May 2010, they accepted that and they sent the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade program. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is the movie where Indiana Jones has the Holy Grail.
Yes.
And they send a Nazi woman, Elsa Snyder,
Yes.
to try and get the Holy Grail of him.
Yes.
So they did that, and they sent the woman in about June, initially by Skype, in June 2011. And that went on to about October 2012, this year. So I've got some photos here, and I'll just use this to get your reaction. You'll love this. You'll absolutely love it. Can you see this photo here with the woman with the two pockets and the hat?
Yes.
That's Elsa Snyder, the female Nazi agent in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yes.
And this here to the right is the woman they sent me. They
Really?
even look
A very close facsimile.
they look so identical.
Greg, this is terrific. We have to take our final break. This is Jim Fetz, your host on The Real Deal, with my very special guest, Greg Hallett. talking about the royal family of England and its lack of legitimacy. We'll be right back. This is Jim Fetz, your host on The Real Deal, concluding my conversation with Greg Hallett, discussing once again the illegitimacy of the occupants of the crown in England today, Queen Elizabeth II, her family, and a host of other ramifications, including related to Prince William, Prince Harry, and Kate Middleton. Greg, I think your listeners are going to find this quite stunning stuff.
Thanks. Just going back to New Zealand for a minute. New Zealand is actually defined as everything west of the west coast and everything east of the east coast, and including the outlying islands of Stewart Island, the Snares, Auckland Islands, Campbell Islands, Chatham Islands, Bounty Island, Antipodes Islands, Kermadec Islands, Niue, Tokelau, Cook Islands, and the Ross Dependency in Antarctica. But it does not include, New Zealand does not include the main North Island and the South Island. Can you see the map in the middle of the screen?
Yes.
Good. You see, all of New Zealand is included in these blue lines. And there's no blue lines around the North and the South Island.
Yes.
This is actually on the official The Realm of New Zealand website, showing the Royal Standard of the Realm of New Zealand and the official flag of the Governor-General of the Realm of New Zealand. So the laws of succession change are being manufactured in what's called New Zealand, which doesn't actually exist. So it's a place that's not a place. So Wellington is down in the bottom of the North Island, which legally is not a place. So when New Zealand challenges Japan on their whaling in New Zealand waters, Japan laughs New Zealand out of court because the North and South Island of New Zealand have no legal status.
Remarkable. I don't know how you come up with this stuff, Greg. It just astonishes me.
So New Zealand is a place that is not a place.
It's as though other historians simply haven't been paying attention.
We're in a time that is not a time. We're in a place that is not a place, New Zealand, and we're in a time that is not a time. Now, in 1700s, England did this with time. Other countries did it as well, but they did it in different styles and at different times. In England, in the colonies, the 3rd to the 13th of September 1752 did not exist. In England, the New Year's Day was changed from the 25th of March to the 1st of January in 1752. So 1751 was a 282-day year, from the 25th of March to the 31st of December. So we had a new New Year's Day. So there's 94 days of history missing. 94 days of history missing. On top of that, England changed 1751 to 1752. So there may be 1 year and 94 days of history missing. Now the main calendar ended on 28th of October 2011 or the 21st of December 2012. And the 94 days from this takes us to the 31st of March 2013. So it appears that the laws of succession to the throne of England are being changed in the North Island of New Zealand, which is not a legal place, in a time frame from the 28th of October 2011 or the 21st of December 2012 to the 31st of March 2013, which is not a time. A place that is not a place and a time that is not a time. And this has to do with checker children. The last time they did this was in the Atlantic Charter, which was actually called the Joint Declaration by the President and the Prime Minister. And it was done in Argentia or Placentia, which is in Nova Scotia. And afterwards, both those towns were moved, and at the time, the legal status of that town was undefined. And it's quite amazingly confusing, but it's a direct parallel. Probably best if I maybe read it. The status of the base was also under question, as it appeared that Placentia Bay was a location that was not a location and a time that was not a time, discussing things that were never discussed, in order that they were never revealed, and if they were, they could never be substantiated in a time or a place which a court demands, and everything about the Atlantic Charter was a magic operation. This was Alice in Wonderland material that would have made the pedophile Lewis Carroll, Charles Ludwig Dodgson, proud. Why? Because it involved child engineering individually and on a massive scale. And the child engineering from the Atlantic Charter, which was actually a misnaming of the joint declaration of the President and the Prime Minister, which was Roosevelt and Churchill, which was unsigned by Roosevelt and maybe signed by Churchill on Roosevelt's behalf, was a checker child. And that checker child was sired by Winston Churchill with his daughter-in-law, Pamela Digby Churchill Hayward Harriman. And that child was Bill Clinton, exported from England in 1946 to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and raised as the president, who then created enough of an excess in wealth in America to pay back the entire Lend-Lease agreement. And the Atlantic Charter was all about Lend-Lease. Now it appears that Prince William, being the biological son of King Juan Carlos of Spain, that Prince William is also a checker child, someone else's child sent to another country to be raised to the top of that country. The same as Bill Clinton was sired and born in England and sent to America to be raised to the top of that country. And it's all on the Winston Churchill siring line. In a time that's not a time, in a place that's not a place. It's a magic operation. You see it?
Yeah, it's really quite astonishing, all things considered.
It's bizarre. And I've got like, sort of half a dozen pages, maybe 10 pages on the magic operation of Argentia and Placentia Bay. But it's interesting that it's called Placenta Bay, like a woman's placenta. That's worth noting. I thought I would talk about the operations that have been happening on me while I've been doing this work. And the operations are an indication that A, your work is true, and B, it's been noted, and C, it has enemies. And the lengths that those enemies will go to.
And those enemies are very powerful, my friend.
I think, yeah, it's quite hilarious actually, just how powerful they are. It's we're talking about the World War II Nazis and the post-World War II Nazis really having a good crack at me to see what they can engineer. Because I said that I delivered the Holy Grail to Roslyn Chapel in May 2010, probably revealed that in an interview probably about January 2011. And about May 2011 I started to get these Skype calls from this woman who looks exactly like Elsa Snyder out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which had Indiana Jones with the Holy Grail and Elsa Snyder trying to get it off him. So she came up with the idea of a manuscript by the commander of Operation James Bond, who's called John Ainsworth Davis. I was to produce the manuscript into a book, and then she was to promote the book, get the movie rights, and share the movie rights. I met her twice, and both times I was sick. I got sick. The first time I met her, I had to be rushed to hospital within 24 hours. And I had just kidney stones like you wouldn't believe, and I was on morphine like you wouldn't believe, and I was vomiting like you wouldn't believe, and I was in agony like you wouldn't believe. And I was basically screaming down the hospital. And the only other time I've had kidney stones is when I've been in the presence of a Nazi, which was Peter Williams QC, in court. But the second time I met her, I also got sick with kidney stones. So she didn't promote the book at all, not one bit. Didn't contribute to any costs, took 150 copies of the book, and then used the book as leverage to get the movie rights, and then stole the movie rights and left me with the book unpromoted, which cost £100,000, cost me £100,000, and she said send me an itemised account, so I sent her an itemised account and it came to exactly £100,000, which was interesting. Her name is Countess Lawrence de Mello, and she needs a public warning. She's a practicing witch. She's admitted this to me. She's a practicing witch, and in her third marriage, she married the son of the man in Argentina who supplied the land to the Nazis post-World War II. He was the biggest supplier of land to the Nazis post-World War II. So it was a Nazi operation, and it was organised by Peter Williams QC, who was the agent for Prince Philip, and organised by Prince Philip. I ended up having an interview with John Ainsworth Davis, who purportedly wrote the original manuscript, and very likely did, although he couldn't produce a copy of the original manuscript. And this is very interesting. He admitted, well, I was there, had a cup of tea with him, I was there for 2 hours, ended up having a gin in the garden. And he admitted that he was sexually abused as a child in Ampleforth College, which is Catholic. One of the things about the paedophile victims is that they end up having an enormous respect for authority. John Ainsworth Davis was run as an agent, and as an agent murdering, so as a public schoolboy contract killer from the age of 15. From the age of 15 to 21, he was working in World War II. And in October 1943, he was sent in to meet Adolf Hitler. And he had the opportunity to kill Hitler, but he couldn't do it, because Hitler grabbed him by the cheeks and went, "How I am a son," and all that sort of stuff. But because he was a pedophile victim, he had the utmost respect for authority, whether it was British or German. And that vastly affected the outcome of World War II. He was present when Lord Louis Mountbatten introduced Prince Philip to Princess Elizabeth. Prince Philip was 18, Princess Elizabeth was 13. He said that when he first met Prince Philip, they all thought he was a complete wally then. They thought he was a complete dick, total wanker. But recently he's come on side with Prince Philip. So it appears that the entire book was also part of an operation. And indeed, when I was editing the book, it was written like it was a psyops. It was a psyops to edit. It was incredibly difficult to read and edit and follow. So it took an enormous amount of time. When Lawrence de Mello was trying to get the movie rights, John Ainsworth Davis's agents actually signed other movie rights over in front of her, but not this one. It was like this massive operation to waste 8 months of my time and £100,000. Now, when I first went to the hospital with the kidney stones, after meeting Countess Lawrence de Mello, within 24 hours I was in hospital for 2 days. So I was on medication for pain. And I bought a Mercedes van.
Hospitals, by the way, are dangerous places to be.
I know, but luckily it was the 5th and 6th of June 2012, which just happened to be the same days that Prince Philip was in hospital. So if it was arranged that I'd get kidney stones and be on morphine and be completely out to lunch in hospital for an assassination, then the person who ordered the assassination, Prince Philip, was in hospital at the same time. So that was fantastically lucky. And it was interesting that the person who took me to hospital was actually the Welsh Prince of Wales. And he actually, he was very good. He actually slept in the chairs next to the bed and made sure I wasn't attacked the whole time I was there.
Excellent.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant.
I have known persons who were murdered in hospitals.
It's called the Liverpool Care Pathways, where they just increase the mix of morphine and then just drift you off out into a state and you're dead. So I was in hospital at the same time as Prince Philip. I was still on medication, but shortly afterwards I had to buy a van to distribute the books. So on Gumtree I bought a Mercedes van for £4,000 and paid for it through what appeared to be PayPal. The van never turned up. So it was a £4,000 rort. It was a rip-off. And then I found out that Gumtree is actually owned by PayPal. I found that the person who was running the fraudulent Gumtree account had 5 accounts in Barclays Bank, simultaneously exposed as an incredibly corrupt bank. And it appears that the Nazi Prince Philip has influence over PayPal and Gumtree and is running frauds. And as the Metropolitan Police serve the Queen, who's the wife of Prince Philip, by the extortion marriage of the century. So far in the 7 months that there's been a police investigation, all I've had is holiday reports from the police, notifications of when they're going on holiday.
Greg, that's ridiculous. This is an electronic fraud, and it'll be the easiest kind of crime to solve.
Yep, absolutely. Not only that, is they found the person's address. Rather than go there at most a 10-minute drive, they had what appears to be an agent sniff around in all the neighbouring properties, but not that one, to alert the person to leave. And as soon as they left, they went and investigated and found out that the person had left. It was all about losing money and losing time. The idea with the final Mountbatten report written by John Ainsworth Davis to Lord Louis Mountbatten was that it wouldn't make any money. It would suck up a lot of time, suck up a lot of money and resources, and delay the main book, which was the Hidden King of England, and that the current British royal family is illegitimate. And they wanted to delay things to have a law of succession change from a place that's not a place in a time that's not a time.
You've been through it all, my friend. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Just totally. So that's the, that's my apology. So I've got sort of probably about I don't know. I've got maybe 6 books or so that I haven't had time to reprint, to re-edit and reprint, to send to people. It's because I've been under a PSYOPs operation, which is just very clear, really for the last 3 years. I produced Hitler Was a British Agent in 2006, and then 2007 I actually wrote and published 4 books. So from 2008 on, the attacks have just really increased. Yeah.
Greg, in the last 2 minutes that remain, could you recommend to our readers, our listeners, where they could go for more information about your work?
www.theworldoftruth.net. They can listen to my interviews and see the books I've done and the books I'm trying to re-edit and reprint, and the new ones that are coming out. Now, one thing in the last interview when I was talking about the King book, I was talking about how the print runs were sabotaged, and I said that the pages were printed backwards. It was about 80 pages in reverse order.
Yes.
The head was cut off the top of the book. The colour pages were printed black and white, and some were colour. And it was also printed on really low resolution. There was not enough glue, so the pages fell out. But also, they printed another set where the blues were pink, and they blamed that on a power cut.
Greg, this is so unprofessional. Printers and publishers simply do not make mistakes of this magnitude. It's obviously deliberate effort to sabotage your work.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, and to delay it. And I spoke to the true Prince of Wales about it, and he said they're going to be exposed as a fraud anyway through the book, so why even bother with challenging the laws of succession? But I did say in the end of the movie, from the last interview, in Hallett Report number 5, that all of the Commonwealth heads of governments need to contact me and listen to the story before they vote. Otherwise, they're voting being completely uninformed and ill-informed. And people in all the Commonwealth countries need to contact their heads of government and alert them to Hallett Report number 5.
So let me reiterate that everyone who wants to pursue this should go to theworldoftruth.net, Hallett Report number 5, to stay current and, of course, listen to these ongoing interviews with Greg Hallett. Greg, I can't thank you enough for coming on again to The Real Deal to present the results of your completely astonishing research.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. The 28th of October 2011 was also one of the dates for the end of the main calendar. And on that day, I was standing on the conquering line in Europe with 2 others working it.
Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, thanking my